Hey guys, Cerealkiler here with another video for you guys. Today we're going to be doing 3 different Dragons runs. This team right here is the first one we're going to do. This isn't the team that I normally run Dragons with, but I like this team because it does not utilize Verde. I do happen to have a Verde, so I use my Verde because he is great in Dragons, but I know a lot of people don't have him, and you kind of have to go about things a different way without a Verde for Dragons 10. And this team right here actually came about because a friend of mine, we started playing around the same time, but he didn't get a Verde, and it makes it a lot harder to do well in Dragons. So we were messing around with some monsters that we both had, a couple actually that he had that I didn't, and a couple actually the other way around that I had built that he hadn't yet. And this is kind of what we settled on as a really good, relatively easy, fusible, or super easy to get, really safe Dragons 10 team. Now this run right here, you'll notice they armor broke the dragon, not one of the 2 crystals. For pure speed, that is going to be the fastest way to get through it. And with this team, it's super invincible, so it doesn't matter. But technically, you're actually a little bit better off if you kill one of those side crystals there. Now, right there, you'll see something that happens constantly. Sigmarus died, which we do not care about at all. Totally acceptable. I don't know why Makine didn't resurrect him. Right? Oh, because the Zyros must have reset him. But people will die in here every once in a while, and it just does not matter. He's going to die again just because of bad RNG. But does not matter at all. They're going to have plenty of time to kind of get refocused before the dragon comes up. And this was, kind of a bad example of where Zyros got a reset off and killed Sig, and then Sig died again due to popping up weak before Bella could get him a heal. But it's actually kind of nice that this happened, just because you will see how much leeway you have with a team like this. And none of these monsters are, soloing the dungeon with the other 4, just kind of following them around. They all do something super important, and they all do that thing really well. Sig's pretty obvious, but he kind of has a less acknowledged part also. His main deal is in here just to destroy stuff. He has excellent AoE damage, excellent single target damage, excellent hit point based damage. He does everything that you need to do just as far as crushing stuff. He also has a stun on his auto attack, a crit on his number 2, and an attack break on his number 3. Super amazing monster. If you don't have a Sigmarus yet, highly recommend fusing him as your second monster. Your first fusion in my mind should be a Veramos. He is gold everywhere. Now, Veramos, we're really not going to talk about him too much. He does exactly what you all know he does, and it works really great in Dragons. That's why he's in a lot of Dragons teams. We're going to kind of gloss over Talc for a second, hop over to Makine. Makine does a really, really good job in Dragons 10. I don't use a Reviver in a whole lot of places. Very niche will I use one in Arena Offense or Guild Wars. I don't use them in defense at all, but Makine is gold in here. She is what makes this work. Essentially, the other 4 monsters are allowed to die as long as Makine never dies. And Makine, without really even being built that well, can kill a tower and get hit with the revenge and survive it. Barely, but she'll survive it. And she'll survive it without the Talc defense buff. With the Talc defense buff, she just shrugs it off like it never even happened. Now, on that note, that is, in my mind, the nicest part about this team that is very often overlooked is that Talc. Talc is an amazing monster. If you do not have a Talc, you really need to build a Talc. Talc has relatively small heals, but Bella is doing most of the healing in there, and then Makine picks up a lot of the slack. Makine's single target heal is actually very much underappreciated in my mind. It's one of those things where the heal's real small, but you can't gauge the number just on the amount of heals it does. You also kind of have to account for how much the defense buff really helps you. And you'll see that this second team that we're doing right here, basically I pulled the Sig out and put the Verde in. I'm going to keep talking about talc for you guys in a second, but I wanted to explain what's going on here. If you have a Verde, this is the team that I would probably start with. If you don't have a Verde, I would use that team that we just saw, just destroy dragons. If you do have a Verde, I would start right here. And this is kind of this is going to be the middle video of the three. So we'll touch on the last change in a bit. And it's going to kind of seem like I'm yo-yoing around with the monsters, but it makes sense. That first team, without the Verde, those 5 specific work really well. When you introduce the Verde, you have a lot more play with your other 4 monsters. So you'll notice talc is in this one also. If you bring these 5 monsters to Dragons 10, the rune requirements that you need to get like a 99.9 whatever crazy high success rate is drastically lower than anything else. We'll go over the runes at the end of this video. The other, well, my Verde, my Veramos, and my Bella, and the Sig that you saw earlier are runed pretty well. My Makine is runed super weird with just like I think she's got like energy, you know, focus, guard, or something just not ideal at all. And they're not necessarily really good sub-runes, so they're all 9 and 12 maybe. I don't want to bump them up higher because I don't like the runes. And my Talc's runes are terrible. And he's 35. But with these 5 together, it really doesn't matter. You need speed on your Verde, and your Veramos, and your Bella, and the Makine and the Talc just have so much free reign. You'll see they're in here just invincible mode, destroying this dungeon. Now, neither of these 3 runs we're doing today are going to be about, you know, crushing it in the fastest time possible. My goal with these videos is to get people that aren't killing dragons into killing dragons. And this one right here has a ridiculously low rune requirement compared to other builds. The problem is that Verde is what drops the rune requirement a lot. When you pull the Verde out and put the Sigmaris in, it helps you a little bit defensively with the hit points, but the Sigmaris needs to be runed really well to be able to crush stuff, or at least for me really well, which for a lot of you is not that great at all. But in here, it just really shines how lax they let you be with these rune requirements. And back to the gloriousness of Talc, he's a lot of the reason why you have that huge lax. Bella's doing most of the healing. You just saw Makine right there do her single target heal, which when I first got her, I'm like, oh, that might as well heal for -2 on a 50 turn cooldown. Screw that heal. It's actually pretty decent. She'll throw it on the lowest guy, so it is single target, but there's a lot of times where one guy needs a heal, mainly after something kills a tower and then gets revenged and then revived. And Makine is a pretty solid heal. The heal is roughly as big as Bella's heal, it's just only single target. So it's really nice when you get someone to die and then get revived, and you can Bella heal him back to 60%, and then Makine will slap her heal on him, and the guy's full, like it never happened. Now, the Talc has a much smaller heal than the other 2, but it's on a 3-turn cooldown. My Talc is violent, so he does it every, 2.2 turns, or however you want to look at it. He's spamming that heal. But the numbers on the heal with a 35 Talc with fairly terrible runes are not that great. Well, the key is that defense buff. That defense buff gives your monsters so much more stability. It's really funny to see, you know, someone kill a tower and then get revenged by the dragon. And if it's like my Veramos or my Makain, she just shrugs it off like it didn't even happen. I don't know the number, but it'll hit for like 3 or 4K, like nothing, with that defense buff up when the dragon hits someone that's relatively sturdy. It's still going to kill like a Verde, but you don't care. Verde dies, Makain pops him back up, everyone's happy. If you don't have a Talc, you're going to see this a lot. I use Talc in a lot of I use him a lot because he's a great monster. And you're going to see me tell you to use him a lot because he's great. I got a pretty decent guard rune. I think we'll try to make something out of that for copper. So definitely keep that. We will check with that later. Now, I'm going to take Talc out of this one for you guys. Do not take that as me saying, you know, Talc is you know, a weak leap or whatever. This is just something I progressed to that speeds things up a lot. You pull the Sig back in from the first one, and then you pull the Talc out of that first one, and you put the Verde in, and this team right here is what I'm using to farm runes. This thing will all day reliably just murder this dungeon. Technically, it is not as invincible as the team with Talc in it, but with my runes, it's enough to where it's basically invincible, and it's way faster. This just is a little bit harder to rune, aside from the fact that you have to fuse and build the Sigmaris, which is much harder to do than the Talc. Another reason on that note that you'll notice my Talc is 35. I have a lot of 35-star monsters that are 35 because I don't really like them, and I'm using them like temporarily, so I don't want to invest in 6-starring them. My Talc is not 35 for that reason. My Talc is 35 because he does not necessarily... I don't have the runes to give him enough hit points to make his heal really big. So that would be one really nice thing about 6-starring him, is getting his heal up, and I don't think his heal will really get that much bigger in my particular case because I don't have nice runes that I can spare for him right now. And the guy just does his job so well at 35 that it's hard for me to justify 6ing him. I'm relatively new. I don't really know, but I'm probably 6, 7, 8-ish months into the game, probably around the 6 mark, and you know, my list of monsters that I need to 6-star is so long, and every once in a while I'll get a new one, and it'll be like a damage dealer, and I'll go, man, this guy needs to be 6-star, or I can't use him. You know, I just got a Hua. I can't rock a 5-star Hua. It's just not going to do the numbers I need to. But a 5-star Talc does exactly what I need it to do. The Talc never dies unless something weird happens, whereas in, you know, anything else would have died at the same time. So it's almost bad for the Talc. The Talc does its job well enough at 35 that I'm like, I don't need to 6-star you. But I want to convey that there's 0% of me going, Talc is kind of a crappy monster, so I don't want to 6-star it. Mine happens to be 35 just because it does its job perfectly well at 35. I played around with a lot of monsters and dragons to get my team nailed, and then also to get the non-Verde team nailed. And anything else that I brought in at 35, like the whole time I was going, holy crap, this thing was dying, and it was dying on cooldown and wasting all my Makain reses. And it's amazing how much sturdier like a 35 Talc is than so many other like 40 monsters. It's ridiculous, that passive. In PvP, the passive doesn't always proc. In PvE, that thing procs constantly, and it effectively gives him like twice as much health. And in that regard, he would, you know, take twice as much healing as well, because he doesn't get penalized for having high health, because he doesn't have high health. He just takes very low damage. So that's my third run, guys. That is what I like to do. Given whether or not you have a Verde and a Sig, if you do have a Verde and a Sig, I would go with this third one. If you have just the Verde, or if your runes maybe are not up to super snuff, that second team is amazing for just throwing stuff together and then getting into that dungeon. And the first team similarly has relatively lax rune requirements, with the caveat that you don't have the Verde in there, so it does become a little bit more stringent. But Talc, if you don't have a Talc and you're not just blowing through dragons in a minute and a half, you need to build Talc. Talc is amazing, and I can't stress how glorious he is enough. Not gonna buy that now. So we'll go over the runes real quick. My Verde, I don't want to focus on him too much, but he's fairly cookie cutter. He's a little bit slower than I'd want. He's a little bit tankier than most people's Verdes. I use him in PvP a lot, and I really like him like this. I tried him, or I had him with like 4,000 less hit points and another 25 speed. In Dragons, that's way better, just blatantly better. In PvP, I like him like this. He'll tank, a Camilla of equal runes as me. He'll tank at no problem. And, every once in a while we get wrecked by some crazy Camilla, but she'll wreck anything I got, so it doesn't matter. I really like my Verde a little bit slower. Well, I don't like him slower, he just has to be slower with my runes to get him this tanky. I'm looking forward to making him a little bit faster, though. My Verde's Violent Revenge, I also lost a decent amount of speed when I switched to Violent Revenge, but that is glorious. The Violent and Revenge procs on Verde just affect things so much. And he's speed, crit rate, hit points, which I think is pretty standard. I just have hit point subs for days on this guy. And my Bella is, I think, also pretty standard. I think my Bella is actually a little bit squishier than most people's, and a little bit more accurate than most people's, at least with my rune level. If you go high enough, they got more hit points, more speed, and more accuracy. But I really like my Bella. She goes almost everywhere, and she just is gold in Dragons. She is going to be also speed, hit point, accuracy, and I have no excuse to not have that maxed. I use my Bella everywhere, so when I'm done with this video, I'm actually going to fix that. Who else do we got in here? So the Sigmaris. This is my Sigmaris. Pretty nice. It's one of my better runed monsters. Like I said, I've been in here 7-ish months or so, so I don't have the greatest crazy selection, but this works really well for me. I love Sigmaris on Violent, and then I just happen to have Blade because I really like 100% crit damage dealers. Sigmaris, it's not the most important piece in the teams, even when Sigmaris is in the team. Sigmaris is really good at crushing stuff without amazing runes. It's just you get the amazing runes on him, and then he starts to crush things at just ridiculous speed. But he can pull his weight with a fairly average set of runes. He is going to be attack, crit damage, attack. I would like my Sig a lot faster, but it's just really hard to get him faster and keep those other stats. Veramos, another super important guy in that team. If you don't have a Veramos, that would probably be my first priority, is fusing a Veramos. This guy is gold everywhere. Now, my Veramos is probably, again, a little bit tinkier and maybe a little bit slower and probably a little more accurate than a lot of people's. I use him in PvP as much as I can, and I love him like this. He does not need to be anywhere near this tanky for Dragon's Run, and if you're going to use a real damage dealer like a Sigmaris, he does not need to be anywhere near this accurate either. If you're not going to take a Sigmaris and you're going to do like that Talc team or a Talc team without a damage dealer, you want your Veramos to be really accurate, because without a damage dealer, your Veramos dots are actually a huge majority of your damage if you're not taking someone like a Sig. So we'll go over this real quick on Violent Focus, because I use him in PvP a lot, and I really want his accuracy on his Super Crush to be as high as possible. My Violent, or my Veramos, I actually just switched over. He is Violent Focus, but I've finally got him Speed Hit Point, and that's how he ends up as tanky as he is compared to my other monsters. Now, this right here is the shining star of this video, I think. My Talc is ruined for kind of everything, but I use him in TOA a lot, which is why he has so much accuracy, because being able to taunt stuff in TOA is super gold. But if you look at him, he is about 100% hit points and some resistance on accident and some accuracy where I can get it. If you really look at this guy's runes and break them down, they're pretty shit. When you compare like this guy's runes that has like almost 200% hit points, almost 100% speed, and 80% accuracy, this guy's got 100% hit points, 20% speed, and 70% accuracy, and some resistance that totally happened on accident. You don't need resistance to use a Talc in Dragons. 100% you do not. This is amazing. This is why I love this guy. At 35 with pretty mediocre runes, does a great job, and you'll see that nice little blue rune right here. I actually just switched him over to a speed rune on rune day. I moved stuff around, and I'm just so uninclined to put money into this guy's runes because he does his job so gloriously well. But I would say that speed hit point would be the way to build him in most situations. If you're going to use him as like a TOA, especially a TOA boss monster, speed hit point accuracy is really well. And I find he's plenty sturdy with 100% hit points. So, and I have some pretty decent hit point subs in here. So mine ends up with speed hit point accuracy. If you're just trying to break that barrier into your Dragon's auto team, I would go speed hit point. Or if you don't have any of these cool speed runes, I would even consider hit point. But I don't think he needs 3 hit point runes at all. He just also doesn't really need accuracy in Dragons. Violent is super key on him. Any of these monsters with a 3-turn super amazing mode button, Violent just shines so much. If your cooldown's like 7 turns on some super button you have, yeah, Violent is awesome, and it's just as cool as everyone knows it is. When you have a 3-turn cooldown and you Violent proc, it is glorious. The amount, you get essentially 33%, or well, whatever, 22% more heals. But the fact that the cooldown's already so low, it really just kind of shines. My Talc is slow enough and on Violent compared to the rest of my monsters that most of the other monsters will have that Talc buff up for either 100% or near 100%, because all Talc has to do is Violent proc one time in between buffs, and it'll let the cooldown drop enough to let him recast it. So it's really great when you're using him in dungeons. He'll be spamming this constantly. And about the only time my monsters don't have the Talc buff is when they walk into a new wave and lose all the buffs. Now Makain is another really important part of this dungeon. I was telling you my Makain doesn't have the fanciest runes, and that's because, what a Makain is. In my mind, a Makain should have, 200% hit points, plus 80 speed, and, 100% crit, and 85% accuracy. And I'd like to have, 100% defense. Now that's asking a shitload, way more than I can give a monster. So I dropped the CC aspect of my Makain, so my crit rate and my accuracy is shit, but with 200% hit points and 100% defense, I can tank that like a boss. You can walk into like the Zyro stage and a crystal can armor break her and another crystal can armor break her and Zyros can kick her in the face and she's at like 60% life. It does nothing to her. She is a beast like this. Offensively, she doesn't do as much magic as you would like, but her job is to never die, so that people like Verde and Bella and Sigmaris can die all day long, and she just picks them right back up. Now, this is where my runes are kind of odd here because I specifically wanted the 200% hit points and the 100% defense, and this is where she ended up. I wouldn't mind revenge on her if she had higher crit and higher accuracy, but she just doesn't have those enough. There's no reason that mine should be revenge. It just ended up that I got revenge runes on here that worked really well for this monster. So mine is energy, revenge. As kind of a starter set, I skipped over giants a little bit. I didn't farm it probably as much as most players do. If you farmed it enough and have a nice selection of despair, I think if you ruined her despair energy would probably be a really good way to walk into dragons, because then you can at least get some CC out of the despair runes. If you have amazing runes and you can ruin her with crit and accuracy, then I would probably violent revenge her and not even double question it. Without that, I would like to put her on despair if I had kind of this quality runes, but I just don't have them available. They're tied up on my other monsters. So if you guys have any questions, please let me ask. I've got tons of hours and spreadsheets and stuff, kind of nothing fancy or pretty, but stuff that I messed with a long time I've got a lot of hours messed around into my Dragons team. I got into a Dragons 10 auto team in my